It's not really the brown girls from Jersey City who save the world.
Welcome back, Screen Crush. I am Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the first trailer for Ms. Marvel. I am very excited about this show because the Ms. Marvel comics are awesome. They're about a Pakistani teenager growing up in Jersey City named Kamala Khan. Now, in the comics, she is an inhuman. These are people who are born with the latent ability to gain superpowers if they're exposed to a special fog called the terrigen mist. And I don't know if you remember, but the Inhumans are already in the MCU. They've appeared twice. Once on that show you never watched, and also on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is very much worth watching. So, obviously, they've changed her origins in the show, which I'm going to get into later on. I love these comics so much because she is an ordinary, fangirl teenager who dreams of living a superhero life. She's like Peter Parker if he were just a new character today. She also comes from a strict religious household and her parents are a bit overprotective, which makes it very challenging to be a superhero. Now there are some elements of fandom who are going to say that Marvel's only making this show because of forced diversity, and this is a really silly assumption to make. This is a great character who I'm very excited to see adapted to this series. So let's break this trailer down. We start on her notebook where she has drawn pigs flying through space in spacesuits. Now this could just be her imagination at work, but there's also an expression that the impossible things will happen when pigs fly. Like when that kid Kenny in your school said, "Oh, everybody will watch comic book movies when pigs fly." Well, we showed you Kenny, didn't we? Or in this case, we'll get a live-action adaptation of Ms. Marvel when pigs fly. It also shows her love of Captain Marvel, who flies around in space. She also wrote down ordinary teenage stuff like a reminder that she has a driving lesson today and that she has an essay due. And at the bottom, we see that she's drawn Ant-Man and an inverted version, the Man-Ant. Now later, we're going to see a few possible connections to Ant-Man and the quantum realm. Now this inversion is also interesting because later in the trailer, we see her point of view suddenly shift like she's looking at another plane of existence, which is going to tie into the Ant-Man stuff I'm going to talk about later on. Now the music playing is Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, chosen because it's a bop and because her powers do involve bright, blinding lights. Also, in many ways, she's been blinded by the lights of the superhero life, and it's keeping her from seeing the reality around her. Then the camera slowly pans upward into a thought balloon from a comic panel as the view of the trailer condenses into a comic book panel. This is how she sees the world, in a kind of fantasy, daydreaming point of view. Even the Marvel logo becomes hand-drawn. And wait a minute. Rewind. Is that Colossus's arm? Is this the first we're seeing of mutants in the MCU? Sorry. Back to the trailer. This stylized view of the world calls back to other comic book adaptations. There was Ang Lee's Hulk, which attempted to use comic book panels to tell its story. And of course, Edgar Wright's brilliant Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And all of this is an homage to the classic 60s Batman series. The click of the guidance counselor's pen is a classic case of comic book on screen automatopoeia. And I love how it extends past the gutter of the panel, just like they do in the comics. Small detail, I also like the box of tissues on his desk, just in case a student needs to break down and cry. This guy is really trying to be cool with his earring and his 90s sweater. This GWW could stand for G. Willow Wilson, who wrote 2014's Ms. Marvel #1, introducing Zoe Zimmer. I also appreciate the hang in there cat in the background. Later we'll even see a drawing of a cat on Kamala's wall. If she's a fan of Captain Marvel, maybe she's also a fan of Goose, her flirkin.
But how would she know about Goose? All that stuff in the 90s was kept a secret.
Yes, that's true. And she also wears a costume that replicates the Kree uniform that Carol wore in the 90s. So, my theory is that after Black Widow dumped S.H.I.E.L.D.'s files in The Winter Soldier, the events of Captain Marvel the movie became declassified. And then, following the blip, Carol returned to Earth, she helped out her home planet, and then girls like Kamala really started looking up to her.
I am satisfied by your answer. I love you.
I love you too. I love this stylized view of the passage of time, like she's stuck on a single minute and the world is spinning around her, threatening to leave her behind. See, she wants to live in a fantasy world, and reality keeps threatening to intervene. Even as the camera rotates around her, we see that there are posters for community colleges behind her. Even the vote for Dustin Berry for president is a reminder that some of her peers have their goals all straightened out. And no doubt, every adult in her life, her parents, her teachers, her guidance counselors, are pressuring her to figure out what she wants to be.
Do I have to figure out my whole future before lunch, or...
And of course, she already knows what she wants to be.
A superhero.
And Dustin Berry is the lead set buyer in the art department of this show. Congrats, Dustin, you got your name on Screen Crush. Now, the people with her in this scene are her best friend Bruno from the comics, and this mean girl she imagines with devil horns is Zoe Zimmer. In the comics, she's the popular girl that Kamala saves right after she gets her powers. And speaking of the Avengers shirts, we can see Old School Carol, Wasp, and Valkyrie in their Beyonce formation.
Girls get it done.
Now, I think it's really cool that Valkyrie is on this shirt because it shows how prominent she has become on the world stage after taking control of New Asgard. Now, of course, in Spider-Man No Way Home, there was a news ticker that revealed that there has been political turmoil in New Asgard, making me really wonder what in the hell's going to happen in Love and Thunder. Then we see Kamala and Bruno in a bodega. This is likely the Circle Q, their hangout spot in the comics where Bruno works. Now, later in the trailer, we see it being blown up. I have some theories on that I'm going to get to later on. They're looking at her homemade Captain Marvel Kree-era cosplay suit that she made for the Avenger Con that we're going to see later on. In her mind, this suit makes her a full-on superhero, and in her fantasy, we even see her execute a superhero landing.
This thing that you do when you whip your hair when you're fighting.
In her fantasy, she's the prom queen, a superhero, she has it all. This is also very reminiscent of Brian De Palma's Carrie. When Carrie is made prom queen, the world is shown through her optimistic, dreamlike state. Now, that scene ends with Carrie being humiliated and losing control of her powers and killing a bunch of people. And actually, we do see Kamala's powers manifest at the Avenger Con later on, maybe leading to a Carrie-like homage. Now, this dude she has a crush on is named Kamran. He is a family friend from Pakistan, and you can tell by the accent.
You're kind of on my shirt.
Sorry.
In the comics, he's an inhuman who has the power of bioluminescence. Now, later in the trailer, you can see Kamala protecting him, and Bruno helping him through the train while he's injured, but more on that later in the video. Kamala is also wearing some interesting jewelry. This looks like the evil eye, a sign of protection that casts bad luck on whoever it's directed to. Later, we also see a black cat drawing in her room, another symbol of bad luck that is used as a symbol of protection. She and Bruno are on the roof of a building with a sign behind them that reads Edison, probably. This could be a reference to Edison, New Jersey, or it could be a reference to her archenemy in the comics, a giant mutated cockatoo with the brain of Thomas Edison who experiments on teenagers. I had my hopes up that he would be the villain in the show, but it looks like they're going the other way. Stupid show. This comic book worldview persists until her guidance counselor makes her snap back to reality.
Oh, there goes gravity.
And then we see her and her family at the mosque for prayers. Like I said, her parents are very strict, which makes it hard for her to sneak off and do superhero things. Then we see her at the New Jersey Avengers Expo. You can tell from the lanyard that she's wearing. She's looking up at a model of Carol flying among the planets and stars. Now, just like in the comics, she is a massive fan of Carol Danvers. Now, in the books, Kamala is a shapeshifter, and she originally changed herself into Carol Danvers. But as time went on, she forged her own superhero identity and realized that a superhero didn't have to look like Carol. They could also be little brown girls from New Jersey. Notice that she's even wearing a patch of Captain Marvel's symbol. And this jacket is also a replica of Carol's. Later, we can see that it has the Air Force Training School patch that Carol wore in the Captain Marvel flashbacks. In her bedroom, we can see that she's a very creative, artistic kid, and I love how she looks at herself in the mirror when she's cosplaying. You can relate. I know you can.
I can too.
It's very good. It's good, Spider Doug. Good. We can also see women with capes and a map of New Jersey. And then we hear her mom say,
"That is not you."
and we're meant to think that she's talking about her dressing as a superhero, but look close, she's wearing different clothes. I think Kamala's just been staying out late, lying about where she is to protect her secret identity. Then there's a shot of her staring at Manhattan from across the Hudson. Notice that she also has a Captain Marvel bike helmet. Then we start to get hints about her new origin. She enters what looks like an attic, judging by this light emanating from the floor. This appears to be old lab equipment covered with a tarp, and there's a lab coat hanging from it. Then she looks into this trunk, which is filled with files, and likely this is where she finds these armbands. Now, these look an awful lot like the quantum bands. In the comics, these are worn by the hero Quasar. They were given to him by a cosmic entity named Eon, who is a big space face tree with an eye growing out of the side of his head. The bands are given to people who will use them to protect the cosmos. They basically manipulate different kinds of energy. But here they seem to manipulate energy and create objects out of energy, much more like the powers of a Green Lantern. Now later we can even see her create platforms to walk on, like Doctor Strange did for Star-Lord in Infinity War. Now here's a theory. I don't think whoever owned this lab equipment invented these bands. To me, these look like Kree or Skrull technology. I think they were left here thousands of years ago, much like the 10 rings, and that the scientist was experimenting on them. There is something about Kamala's DNA that allowed her to activate these bands. Notice that as soon as she touches them, she is subconsciously altering the energy in the room with the flickering of these lights. Maybe she is a kind of inhuman, or is actually descended from the Kree. I have a theory on that I'll get into in a minute. Next, we see her in cosplay at Avenger Con, putting on the bands for the first time. Or maybe she just figured out how to unlock them. And here in the background, you can also see a model of Rocket Raccoon soon just when her powers activate. Now, I don't think that's an accident because her powers are cosmic in nature. Maybe the bands were even invented by the same scientist that experimented on Rocket. After she puts on the bands, her point of view shifts. And by the way, we can also see an Iron Man cosplayer here and a Captain America shield back here. So now her point of view shifting is very much like earlier in the trailer when we transitioned in and out of her fantasy world. Except now she is literally seeing another plane of existence like Frodo when he puts on the One Ring. Now, the energy that emanates from the bands is purplish blue. First theory, these could be a conduit of the energy of the Power Stone.
But the Power Stone was destroyed, reduced to atoms.
Yes, but even though Thanos destroys the stones, their energy stays in the universe. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed. Wanda was able to recreate Vision from the residual energy of the Mind Stone, and Carol got her powers from the Space Stone and retained them after the stones were destroyed. So, what if these bands were imbued with the power of the Power Stone? And here's another theory that connects back to her Ant-Man drawing. In the comics, the quantum bands draw power from the quantum zone. So maybe in this show, they draw power from the quantum realm. So when her point of view shifts and she sees this energy, maybe she's looking at the quantum realm energy that's all around us all the time. The title cards even have the same swirling energy of the quantum realm, so this could all connect. Now, in the comics, the quantum bands can also drain the life force from people. This is very similar to how the Power Stone can eradicate all life that it touches, drawing away its energy. Also in the comics, Kamala gets really tired when she overexerts herself. So maybe the bands also drain her life force, making her get tired when she uses them for too long. In her bedroom, we see tons of Carol posters, her flying through space, and the one above her bed is from the comic cover of Earth's Mightiest Hero #5, drawn by Terry Dodson. Then we see shots from an international location. The production was filmed in the Philippines, but I'm betting these shots are meant to be Pakistan, where Kamala's family is from. We do see her in a formal dress, which could imply that the family traveled here for a wedding. And at this location, we also see her make a giant fist, a hallmark of her shape-shifting abilities in the comics. This looks like she's fighting the hero Red Dagger. In the comics, he's an exchange student from Pakistan who is a hero in his own country. This could be a train station in Karachi where her family is from. Notice the Urdu writing on these signs. Now, in this alley, she encounters these four people who I'll talk about in a second. Notice that under her jacket, she is wearing a salwar kameez. This is a traditional Central Asian garb for women that her original costume was based on from the comics. We also see her entering what appears to be a temple with all these swords and daggers on display. And here is another potential cosmic connection because this dagger was originally used by your mom. And of course, the trailer ends with her sitting on a lamppost replicating this iconic cover from Ms. Marvel #5. So now let's get into a few theories and plot speculation about this story. Kamala finds these bands, which are alien in origin. Now this brings her to the attention of two different groups. One is this group of cops who might be storming into her school. Later in the trailer, we even see a SWAT team in her school hallway next to these lockers. Set photos actually showed that these cops work for an organization called NICE, or NICE. I think this is like the US agency ICE, but these people go after aliens from space, like the Men in Black. If this is true, then they could be after Kamala, but more likely, they could be after Kareem, the exchange student that we see Kamala fighting. We even see her protecting him from a hail of gunfire later in the trailer that's being shot by the SWAT team that we just saw in the school. This even looks like the same location where the cops stormed into, outside the school. Notice the school bus in the background. And there's also another mysterious group, these four people in the alley. The Fantastic Four confirmed? But one of them does seem to follow her to Pakistan because you can see her in the background of the wedding fight. So we know that Kamala is going to appear in the movie The Marvels, and that movie is likely set in space and involves the Kree and the Skrulls. So maybe these four people are Skrulls, or Sword agents, or maybe both, and they were sent to watch over someone. I mean, you remember, Sword is filled with Skrull agents.
I was sent by an old friend of your mother's.
Now back to Kamran. He could be the key to all this. I'm wondering if he could be the MCU's version of Hulkling. In the comics, Hulkling is the child of Mar-Vell and a Skrull princess, making him not only royalty, but someone who could unite the empires and stop centuries of war. So he's placed on Earth for his own protection. Nice and these four people could both be after him, and his role could be expanded in the Marvels movie. Either way, Hulkling's going to be introduced soon. He's a member of the Young Avengers, and literally every other Young Avenger is either coming to the MCU or has already shown up. But that's just what we saw in the trailer. If you noticed anything, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.